Inverter-based resources performance and modeling industry webinar. As a reminder to all participants, this meeting is public. The registration information was posted on the NERC website and widely distributed. Participants should keep in mind that the listening audience may include members of the press and representatives of various governmental authorities, in addition to the expected participation by industry stakeholders. It is NERC's policy and practice to obey the antitrust laws and to avoid all conduct that unreasonably restrains competition. This policy requires the avoidance of any conduct that violates or that might appear to violate the antitrust laws. Any NERC participant that is uncertain about the legal ramification of a particular course of conduct or who has doubts or concerns about whether or not NERC's antitrust compliance policy is implicated in any situation should consult NERC General Counsel Sonia Hasha. Should you wish to ask a question during today's meeting, please use the Q&A feature. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Ong Thought.
Thank you, Kelsey. Welcome, everybody. I'll get the slide started. Okay. Just a quick check. I think the full slides is showing up on the screen I'm sharing, correct?
Yes, it's shown correctly.
All right, thank you, Vitra. Again, welcome everybody. My name is Ong Thant. I'm the principal engineer at NERC. I will be joined by Evan Mickelson, who has worked on the recent level 2 findings together with me. Yeah, today webinar is an informational webinar on the recently released level 3 alert containing essential actions for inverter-based resource performance and modeling. Is a combination from the previous level 2 alerts, and it's one of the tools that we have at NERC to address the gaps that as we see it. Just a quick outline for our webinar today. We'll have a quick recaps on the previous level 2 alerts. The first one on the IBM performance issues from last year. And then we have IBM model quality issues.
Outside gate open.
Deficiencies, and we'll also get some of the get into some of the findings from that level 2 alert. And then we'll get into the content of today. It's a level 3 NERC alert, essential actions for IBM performance and modeling. Then we'll get the reporting instructions, and then we'll finally get into Q&As. We've requested some questions ahead of time. There are a few questions. We'll start with those, and at least utilize the Q&A feature of the WebEx to submit your questions as we go along. With that, I give the mic to Evan.
All right, thank you so much, Ong. Thank you for introducing the topic. So before we dive into the recent alert level 3, I'm going to try and set the stage by going over the prior 2 level 2 alerts from 2023 and 2024. So we'll start with the next slide and the IBR performance issues alert from March 2023. This alert focused primarily on IBR performance and some of the findings from prior NERC reports. So this alert had recommendations that included guidance on protection settings as far as maximizing capability and making them device specific, as well as coordinating the inverters with the plant controllers. Additionally, there was a recommendation to mitigate these known causes of inadvertent protection misoperations. So things like tripping on instantaneous measurements. And then there was another recommendation around leveraging the full dynamic reactive power capability of the equipment that exists on site already. So making sure that you're maximizing what your equipment can do. Some of the data collected, of course, directly motivated the following alert on model quality, right? So there's this performance part of the first level 2 alert, and then we're combining that with the model quality alert, and that all kind of informs the level 3 alert. So we'll go to the next slide. So then this is the model quality alert, and this really revolves all around the IBR models, the dynamic models for them. So the alert recommends a review of field settings and making sure that the field settings you have are reflected in the model, as well as making sure that any changes to field settings on your inverters or plant controllers, that those updates are always reflected in the model. As well as there was some recommendations around various types of models, and recommendations on specific requirements for your IBR dynamic models and different checks that you can perform. So the data collection for this one was pretty significant. We requested the dynamic modeling information from the BES connected IBR generator owners. And so each of them submitted one worksheet per IBR. And those worksheets had a lot of detailed information about the inverters, the plant controllers, and all the different attributes that would inform their dynamic models. We also collected a lot of information from TPs and PCs. We asked them to answer a questionnaire, as well as submit their on-hand IBR models. So with that information, we were able to compare not only just verify individual models and their reasonableness, but also compare them against the model that the GO has, the model the TP has, and then potentially also compare that against the field settings. So we'll get into the next slide and talk about some of the findings that we had from all that data collection. So this report came out in April of this year, and it's an aggregation of all of the different findings we had from the data. So the headline here, overprotected, underutilized. Approximately 2/3 of the protection settings used by respondent GOs were not set to provide the maximum capability specifically for the inverters. So this finding shows that there are still settings that can be changed that can maximize the capability of the inverters, and that can also be updated in the field and then eventually in the model. Another finding around the equipment capability, at least as far as field settings, is that reactive capability is primarily, or not primarily, but for some people, is still operating in the triangle, right? And so we found that in about 20% of facilities, they're still using the triangle reactive capability curve. And so that limits them to a 0.95 power factor, sometimes arbitrarily, right? So it depends on the specific equipment that you have there. We want to make sure that we're reflecting the genuine capability of the equipment, and not something that's an arbitrary limit. All right, so we'll go into the next slide to talk about more of the modeling data. So modeling data not on hand. Some GOs indicated that they did not have certain pieces of data readily available, and that it would take time to go and find that data. Another major finding from the modeling data is that we see systemic modeling deficiencies that potentially indicate there's interconnection process requirements that could be improved in order to solve some of these modeling deficiencies. And I think this is one of the really important findings from the report, is that all these have one field setting, one true plant, but that we have many different dynamic models, or that dynamic models may change from what the GO has on hand, what the transmission planner has on hand, and so looking for reasons that they might be inconsistent, and trying to make sure that If the GO changes something in the field, that it gets updated in their model, the TP's model, and the PC's model. Okay, so I think we'll go to the next slide. This dives a little deeper into some of the specific issues around models not matching between the field setting and what's in the model. So this is specifically for frequency response parameters. You see upward, downward, and droop, and then the frequency response deadband. And so the question is, does the model match the reported field setting? For each of these, at least half of the plants analyzed do match, but we see a very significant amount of mismatch for the dynamic models parameters, specifically around frequency response. So this means that when you look at the field setting and you compare it to what's in the model, the parameters are different. Now, sometimes it's a very minor difference, like a rounding error, but sometimes it's a completely different value. So that would be something that we certainly want to minimize and take care of through improvements in our processes. Okay, so we can also move on to the next slide. So this one looks specifically at ride-through trip settings for frequency and voltage. So the same question, does the model match the reported field setting? And we find that for overvoltage and undervoltage, it's a very similar amount of matching and mismatch. And so we see just over 70% of field settings match the model. So then there's almost 30% there of plants where the reported field setting doesn't match what is shown in the dynamic model for the IVR, right? So that would cause a difference in what you see in the simulation versus what you're going to see in field performance. Now, we also see that with the overfrequency and underfrequency to a lesser degree, but still a significant portion there, almost 20% or more of the ride-through curves not quite matching. And so once again, you're going to see a difference in performance between the simulation and between the real world performance. And I think something important to point out here is that if you have something that is, let's say, how do you say, is in the simulation, it's shown to ride through, and then in the field it doesn't ride through, that's a pretty big reliability gap there. Maybe for something that is shown to not ride through, but then in the field it really does ride through, that maybe that's not as much of a reliability gap, but that it still goes to show that there's some sort of deficiency in the process, so where we're getting a misalignment of field values versus model parameters. All right, so that's all I've got for the recap on the level 2 alerts on IBR performance and IBR model quality deficiencies. So I'll hand it back to Ong, and he's going to walk through the level 3 alert. Thank you, Ong.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you for an excellent walk on this. And as you mentioned, it was a big lift for the industry. The ask from the alert was quite a lot of information. So, I appreciate the industry effort into responding and getting those information out for us to assess the extent of conditions around IBA performance as well as the state of conditions of the modeling. So, yeah, I'll move on to the level 3 alert. So based on the findings from level 2 alerts and based on the disturbance reports that we've seen over the years, I think the reports are stacking up, right? We saw the need to issue the level 3 alert, which contains essential actions, right? Is elevated from the industry recommendations that we previously had in level 2 to essential actions that are being recommended to the industry around the IVR performance and modeling. We published that in May 20th of this year. The drivers are really to address the IPA performance issues and modeling deficiencies, and to address some of the findings that we seen in the previous level 2 alerts. These essential actions to industry was distributed to transmission owners, transmission planners, planning coordinators, as well as currently registered generator owners to enhance the technical minimum requirements and steady processes to mitigate the risks posed by these IBM performance issues, as well as the reliability gap from these modeling deficiencies. So there's generally two buckets of recommendations, essential actions in here. One group is for TOs, TPs, and PCs, and the second bucket is for GEOs. The three essential actions for TO, TPs, and PCs, and there's one essential actions for GEO. Although there's just one, you may have seen in the alert, there's a lot of bullet points in there. So, but in essence, the generally four essential actions, 3 for TO, TPs, and PCs. The very first one is around enhancing its criteria and policies in the generator interconnection and planning activities with additional technical details and IPA specific performance criteria. Right. So these performance-based factors and criteria should be made publicly available in an open and transparent manner. And that's to help ensure uniform IBM performance, both in normal and post-disturbance operation, to address these behavior, right? What is the expected reactive power control mode and parameters? What is the expected frequency response control modes and parameters? What are the expected write-through behavior during system disturbances? What are the expected post-disturbance performance, including settling time requirements, reactive power capability requirements within the continuous operating range of the system voltage, emphasizing the full use of the reactive power capability of these IVRs. Again, this is to hopefully, this will address that 20% or so that's living in a triangle. So essentially, action 1 was about improving the technical minimum requirements around generator interconnection requirements, having clearly set expectations of their performance. Essentially, action 2 is around the modeling. It's specifically to enhance the modeling and steady practices to ensure there's sufficient steady walk can be connected and model quality verifications are performed and documented to reflect models that are representative of what's actually installed or to be installed equipment on the ground. And even the considerations to the following sub-bullets here: model quality and accuracy criteria to ensure the models used an accurate representation of the equipment that are being studied. Number 2, performance tests and conformity criteria that are to be used by the GO to show the model representation meets the performance expectation that's published by TP and PC, and the fee performance. So this is tying back into essentially action 1 that says thou shall have performance expectations, TP, TOs, and TPs. And then the second part, this is action 2, is to have criteria to judge these model performance against those criteria. And the last bullet points here is to have procedures that allow to promote a transparent feedback loop between GOs and applicable entities, so that changes to the proposed design can be captured in the models. Right? So this part is really to promote model updates as throughout the process, interconnection process, and to allow for such to occur. And to continue on the section action 2, once the performance and steady enhancements that we've covered just now are completed, TOs, TPs, and PCs then should enhance the existing criteria used throughout the interconnection, generated interconnection, by implementing these measures in the alert, and apply these factors and requirements to their local reliability planning process. So again, the essential action 1 is about having performance expectations and requirements, just to set the minimum technical requirement for those IBRs. And essential action 2 is around modeling. So the last essential action for TO, TPs, and PCs is to assess what is the external conditions of the current state of affairs, right? So we have NERC has performed from the level 2 alert on IBR performance and level 2 alert on IBR modeling efficiencies. We have findings, and from our vantage point, that we feel that it could be actually looked into more details, and it could be done more efficiently, effectively by the TOs and TPs and PCs, and considering their respective footprint. So such action 3 is really for an urgent TO, TPs, and PCs to perform a detailed review of currently operating IBRs on the system to understand the external conditions on both the real-world performance as well as the potential accuracy of their models and any gaps. So through verifying the performance of the existing IBRs and the models and comparing the feed performance to the model performance against the criteria and requirements that we previously discussed, and making notes of the opportunities to address those issues, and confirm any changes made to the correct any identified issues, potentially update IBR models to reflect new performance if there's any changes in the field, and communicate any model changes to all affected parties. So where the section action 1 and 2 lay the groundwork for improved IBR performance requirements and modeling requirements, essential action 3 is basically to look at this, what's going on right now, and how can we fix this. Now that's the 3 essential actions specifically for TO, TPs, and PCs, and the 4th essential action is the one for the applicable geos of BPS connected IBRs. There are several bullets under this essential action 4. So first is to create and implement processes to help ensure the model used for the evaluation of their design and submitted to TPPCs for use in their generated interconnection and planning processes are accurate and high fidelity representation of the IBRs to the greatest extent possible based on the available information. And second, request unit model validation and model benchmark reports from both their inverter as well as their power plant controller manufacturers. Right? So this is for GEOs to request such information from their OEMs of their inverters and PPC manufacturers. Third, leverage the publicly posted performance requirements. Remember from the essential action 1 for the TPPCs. Leverage those requirements for the interconnection area and finalize the control design. So early on to minimize changes throughout the connection process. That is, and tying in with the essential action 1. And next is to perform a conformity assessment for what was installed and commissioned. So it matches what was actually designed and steady, right? The acceptance criteria of this assessment, whether the plant was designed, steady, and as commissioned, meets the publicly posted performance requirement, should generally be stricter than the criteria used by TO, PC, and TO or PC for measuring the performance, right? For example, the BFR, frequency response performance, for example, during the operation stage, there are criteria that TO or PC uses to measure if the assets are performing as per the requirement for the frequency response, and that usually takes into account the fact that in real life there is never a step change, right? For example, so there's never a frequency step change. Is usually once you have a change, the other units respond, and you usually get a ramp sort of behavior. So it's not very easy to and have a very strict requirement in operational measurement. But let's say it's 20% or 30%, right? But that is for operational measurement. That kind of criteria shouldn't be used for when GOs are testing the plant for frequency response, right? So when we're testing, it's usually a stage test, and the expectation there is that it actually can apply a stricter criteria for the design performance, design and conformity assessment. So that's the idea behind this recommendations, is to target stricter criteria during the conformity testing or commission testing than what they would be the criteria used in the operational stage. Next, under the same section action 4 for the GOs is to use the models that will allow for the parameters in the model space to be easily translated into actual product. Maybe where there are options when it comes to which models that they could use to steady their plant and to submit to TP and PC for the interconnection study. The recommendations here is using the model that has a good match with what's going to be in the field. Allow for it makes it easier to track the IBR equipment and the corresponding IBR models. And I think the rest of the sub-bullets in here in the section action 4 is around change management, around enhancing the change management. First, to ensure that any changes, such as firmware changes that can impact the grid dynamics performance made to the actual IBR or the IBR models, are reflected in both the equipment and the model that are supposed to represent the equipment. The GOs should then communicate those changes to TPs and PCs. GOs should perform this verification before they implement the changes in the field if they're making the changes to the plant. And track any firmware changes within the IBR and make sure there are and changes such as control parameters getting reset to factory default values doesn't occur following the firmware changes. But this is something that we've actually seen from the industry interaction, as well as through our analysis, event analysis of the past service reports. That when we dive into the settings, well, that doesn't look right. Well, turns out there was a firmware upgrades and everything got reset to default values. So that's incredibly important that following any changes, such as firmware changes, there are no unintended changes like that occur. The next is to organize and retain critical IBR information so that it's readily available and they're periodically reviewed for the accuracy. They're kept up to date as part of this enhanced change management process that have been recommended here. So this is, this coming from our finding with the GOs having a long lead time with some of these information that was asked. We believe that some of those information should be readily available, and that they are not. So I think it's very important that we know what we're operating to the T, right? So there are at least the critical IBR information should be the list that we requested, the NERC requested in the level 2 alert regarding the IBR model deficiencies. So such information should be the minimum information that should be retained and kept up to date on a regular basis. This also helps the PCs and TPs. Also, if there's any model issues, or if there's any performance issues, or NERC, if the assets get involved in major disturbance where we do event analysis, having that information really streamline the analysis into these major events. From past experience with these disturbance reports, we've seen that this is not just during the alert process, but also during the when we're gathering the information. Having that information readily available is very helpful. Last but not least, GEOs should consider adding these model requirements and model support throughout the life cycle of the facility to their agreements with their OEMs, right, with the equipment manufacturers, and any entities that are involved in the creation of the IBR models. So I think from our recent alerts and from the disturbance reports, event analysis, I think some GEOs are already aware the importance of this, and we making sure that we're capturing this as an industry-wide. So this is one of the recommendations here for such actions. It's really one you need to know something about all plant, having these the enhancements and the T's and C's with the suppliers can really help speed things up, right? So not only to analyze what went wrong within the within the plant, but also to respond to any request for information. So that's pretty much a very high-level overview of the 4 essential actions that are listed in this alert. It's level 3 alert. These are some reporting instructions that were pulled out of the alert itself. Some of you are already familiar with this. So initial acknowledgement required by May 27 was passed, and the responses to questions required by August 18. Of course, the confidential information handled by NERC. These are considered confidential information according to the section 1500 of the NERC Rules of Procedure. All GOs and TOs, TPs, and PCs are required to at least acknowledge the receipt of this alert and respond as applicable. If there's any issues with login or access or registration queries, please direct your questions to nerc.alert@nerc.net. It's nerc.alert@nerc.net. So I think with that, we can move on into the next part of this webinar, which is Q&A. I realized that I can actually see the questions since I'm the presenter. So I'm going to stop sharing and just look at our questions. What I'll do is I'll start with some of the questions that we received in advance from the when we send out the announcement for the webinar. We end this presentation mode here. Yeah, Vitra, thank you for showing the screen for people to know that we're in the Q&A. Let's see here. Okay. All right, the first question we received was, in light of all the ongoing standards development around modeling, can NERC elaborate on if the current standard development activity did or did not weigh into the timing of this NERC alert? What was NERC's intended goal with the NERC alert that the current standards development is not covering? Okay, well, that's actually a great question. So at NERC, we are looking at all the tools at our disposal to address the reliability risk, right? And the standards is one of them, and alerts are out of the our tools arsenal as well. There are some portions of the alert that are being addressed or being contemplated in the current draft of some of the modeling standards, such as Mod 26, looking at requiring unit model validation, and the and having model verification requirements in there. So I think this question makes sense in that there appears to be perhaps what the standard activities are already covering, and what are we what is this alert trying to cover. So yeah, there are two parts to sort of a two temporal here. The standards have timeline. They have the implementation timeline. That's one piece. The second piece of this is the nature of these recommendations are more into the how piece of of the puzzle. In the standards, we write about what is the minimum technical requirement that we want to require of the industry to perform that will cover that will address the reliability risk. So having said that, it doesn't, and it's really hard to get into the technical hows, right? So for example, if we look at some of the geo requirements, right, of the having a change management, right? So that's sort of a how question that the alert is trying to answer. Whereas in the standard, it would say what needs to happen. And going back to the some of the recommendations in the alert, right, such as the requiring the GOs requesting the model validation and the model benchmarking reports from their OEMs. Those are currently being contemplated in the draft. And our goal is that this should be happening already, right? I think that's why we're revising the standard, and there is a lead time for the standards, and we realize that this needs to go out now so that the OEMs, the GOs can prepare to have these available. So there's some of that thought process behind that as well. And I guess the other part is we look at the essential actions 1, 2, 3 for the TOTPs PCs. it goes beyond the modeling, right? Yes, the Section Action 2 is for modeling, but it goes beyond just the what do you do with the model. It's really one to kind of rephrase to have performance expectations and requirements that's currently not being addressed in the standards efforts. Even the Section Action 2, I think we talked about having model quality and accuracy criteria. Again, this is being somewhat covered by the Model 26, but the eventual state where the standard is going to end up, may or may not have the specificity that we have in the alerts. Therefore, providing more context and more guidance for the industry. Yeah, Section Action 3 for the TPPC is really around assessing the state of the affair as it is right now today. Okay, that's for that questions. That's a really good questions, and I appreciate the opportunity. I think another question is the dynamic behavior of voltages and frequencies are greatly influenced by the load model. Is this being taken into account? Yes, it is true that the load models also affects the overall dynamic behavior of the system simulations, but from our perspective, especially where we want this effort around the IBR risk mitigations, our focus is on the generation side of things, on the IBR side of things. So that's what we focused on. So it doesn't mean that the load models are not important. It's just that we're focusing on the IBR specifically. Just a plug-in for the amazing work Kevin and Jack's doing at NERC, leading the large load task force to understand their characteristics and the unique risks that may pose to the power system reliability. Excellent work going on in there. I encourage you to follow that specific task force. Just thought it's a good opportunity to plug in for that. Let's see. So the next question is, what are the NERC expectations from the affected entities to implement all the listed enhancements in the next 2 years? I think that's our expectation is pretty much set in the alert. And we're expecting this. We know that this takes time. Especially the Section Action 3, for example, for the TPC to have a detailed review of their currently operating IBR fleet. So that's why we're looking at 2-year time frame. What are we expecting? It's pretty much laid out in the alert itself. Those bullet points, can serve as a checklist for that regard. And then the next question here is, what measures should be used to determine the entity has adequate requirements and criteria or procedures to attain their desired enhancement? In terms of what additional criteria and performance requirements should be there, that alert just said that these expectations should be developed and published publicly. And as to the their adequacy, right? So, for example, Section Action 1 says you should have an expected frequency response, control modes and parameters. That is really up to the TP and the PCs and how they want to approach the frequency and the balancing challenge, right? So they're the best person to know how to tackle that. So, for example, we have laid out as much as possible the details, at least the what should be in those expectations. For example, taking the frequency response. We talk about what is the performance expectation from stage test. What are the specific values ranges for parameters like the dead bands and droops, ramp rate limits, and any other settings that that can impact the frequency response performance, right? So the PC should have a general idea of how they want to approach this problem or this challenge, right? The frequency control, and based on that, the details can be filled in. But the sort of the framework or the high, or at least the minimum things to looked at are already in the alert. So we would expect, just take an example of frequency response again. It shouldn't just be you should have a frequency response enable, right? That's not enough, right? We have in the alert what are the other parameters that should be spelled out. That's an example, right? We look at the reactive power control mode. What's the expectation? Is it going to be in the voltage control mode, or is it going to be in power factor? Is it going to be fixed Q control mode? What is it, and what are the specific value ranges for the parameters? Again, we have provided some example parameters in there as well. So the expectation would be that those parameters will be the minimum be in the performance requirements and expectations that DPs, PC, and TOs are going to establish. All right, so that's all the questions I have from the advanced survey. Just kind of look at the Q&A in this meeting here. The first question's already answered. Second questions. Let me just quickly look at this. Okay, that's that's the second question's already answered. Okay. All right, next question is, how do you anticipate this alert data will factor into projects 2022-04 and 2023-05, which both propose revisions to FAC 1 and FAC 2 for interconnection data? How do you anticipate this data, alert data will factor into? So these standards are already kicked off, and there's already a SAR, right, standard authorization request associated with that. And I think the alert itself with the recommendations can be a reference for the standard drafting team that will eventually actually draft the standard. That in terms of the data that we're collecting from the latest alert, unlike the level 2 alerts, this time we require very little alert data back. Relatively, we just need to know what is the plan of action around these alerts. So hopefully that answers this question. Okay. Does a level 3 alert apply to category 1 or 2 IBS only, or does it include any unregistered IBS, DES? So I would, that's one actually a good question, and that's one of the frequently asked questions that we received. And there are questions like, we have IBS connected at 12, 15 kV, they're less than 1 megawatt. Do I need to do anything about it? I need to respond. So I think this is a good opportunity to address that. So what we've in the past in the alerts, we talked about, for example, the level 2 alerts for IBS performance, right? So although it wasn't specifically to the BES connected, PV plants, but we, in the alert itself, we said these recommendations also apply equally to BPS connected, right? That's a wider bucket PV plants as well. So So I'm going to draw the similar line here. Is that if you connect it to BPS connected IBRs, please respond. So generally, the BPS includes all the facility that is connected to transmission and SF transmissions, right? So that for example, if you have it's more like a 1 megawatt, right? So I think it's connecting at the very low voltage level. We can those are the ones that we are after the net here, right? So PPS connected IBRs, please respond. Okay, what's the next question here? Is the NERC alert applicable to those IBRs, the non-FERC jurisdictional generation, i.e. that's used to feed town municipalities or your cooperatives? Yeah, I think I'll say the same. Again, I think regardless of sort of who's your app taker is, if if it's connected to BPS, that is where we draw the line. Let's see here, and in general, these recommendations and are not just well, it really helps whether you are even if you are not, for example, BPS, I would say in general they're very very useful, especially the ones around the geos, right? But for the purpose of the alert, we're focusing on the on BPS connected IBRs. Okay, the next question's already answered. Oh, Essential Action 3, is this mod 26 or 27, or is there something we are missing? Good question. Essential Action 3. So I think the mod 26 has your cyclic the periodic review of the models, right? So I think it's kind of up to the TO, TPCs, and PCs, and that's why we have the time frame here, right? A couple of years is this could all be done as part of the that cycle, or it could be done sort of off cycle. But the timing is not exactly the focus, but really what needs to be done is the focus here. Is to look at in detail the IBR. So it's 26 really focuses on the current 26, right? Give me show me a plot, 2 plots, and typically it's currently unless there's a system disturbance, typically it's a small signal disturbance, right? That's all you get. You get the voltage step test and frequency step test, and that's all the information you get, and that's not sufficient, right? The new 26 will get more deep, more comprehensive than that, but that's in the future. So that for the alert purposes, right, we're looking at beyond that, right? So looking at the real performance and also the model accuracy, that might include more than just looking at what's submitted on the mod 26, right? So I think, for example, would be, just using the NERC alert, the level 2 alerts, the data submission sheets, right? So we're asking a lot more questions than what you typically see in the Mod 26. So, beyond the just stage test, looking at the trip settings, looking at capability versus the settings. So yeah, it covers beyond the 26. What methods are recommended to complete section 3? Yeah, I think I kind of covered that earlier. What's recommended, what methods are recommended for section 3. Like I said earlier, the data that we requested as well as the alerts are at a good starting point for reviewing these models versus the actual plant performance and the settings. Mainly, what we reported in the findings, what GEO says is the settings on the site should actually be reflected on the model, right? So there's about 25%, 30% of the fleet have these trip settings not matching what the GEO set they have on site and what's actually input in the model. So those those should be looked at least, as well as the frequency response, right? That was just one example. The settings not matching what says on the site. Similarly, I think can be set for the voltage control as well. I think what actually just going through each IBRs and following through this similar process, and please reach out to us. We'll be happy to work with you and share some of our methodologies and provide some tips. All right. Next question: would the modeling mentioned in 26-2 help fulfill the Action 3 requirements? As discussed just now, it does help some of the Action 3, but again, that's forward-looking, and we want to assess the currently operating fleet. So there's a temporal difference there. Is there any estimation of some data that can be used for modeling if data is not available for Action 3? I don't, we're talking about IBR models here. And understand that there are really old legacy plans, and that OEMs don't even exist anymore. So I would say the best effort is recommended here. At least looking at what's on site, right? At least if the plant is still operational, there should be a mechanism, regardless of the OEM's state of affairs. There should be a mechanism to see what kind of control parameters that's currently operating, and how it's currently operating, what control mode is operating in. Those needs to be at least be able to pull from the site and compare with the models, including the trip settings. Is there a guidance available that details the minimum Action 4 conformity assessment requirements? I think it ties into the essentially Action 1, which having the performance, technical minimum performance requirements. I mean, an easy reference for the industry will be, say, 2800, right? Attribute 2800 provides an excellent technical reference for performance requirements. So that could be one of the reference. Once there is expectation set, how do you go? How for the GEO? How do you go about assessing the conformity. I think the 2000.2 is covering that part of it, but at the same time, NERC, EMTWG, and IRPS is working on a couple of work items that is trying to help the industry in that regard about how to assess the model validation, how to assess the model benchmarking. So please stay tuned for those. We are expecting end of the year or Q2 next year for completion for those work items. So that again, that is those work items were designed to help the industry with this alert as well as also with the upcoming Mod 26. Right. Okay, while we're at time, and I think we have these questions in here that I didn't get a chance to respond to. Yeah, well, I'll take a look at those questions and if there's a specific question that we need to address to help with the submissions, we'll take appropriate actions. With that, thank you all again for joining the call today, and thank you again for if you're responding to this alert. Thank you again for your effort.